So the main battle in the next, let's say, decade, I think, is going to be against those that value wealth and NGU number go up over those that value freedom. And that's the core um, problem that I see.
Welcome back to the Coin Stories podcast. I'm Natalie Brunell, and here with me is John Stefanopoulos. He is the founder of Futurebit, a miner that you can plug in at home and you can even win a block. And that's where we're going to start. John, it's great to have you on the show. And you guys made a big announcement in the last few weeks that someone like me could have just had this miner running at home and won a block. They won all that Bitcoin. Tell us about it.
Yeah, it was an extraordinary event for us, for the company, for Bitcoin in general. When I founded the company back in 2015, this was like my original goal 10 years ago, to get to the point where a self-sovereign individual would be able to find a block and submit that block. There's a key difference here, and I'll go over it, but submit that block with their own personal node. And that happened in the end of October, 6 months after we launched the Apollo 2 and started shipping. And, I thought it was going to happen within a year. I was surprised it happened in 6 months. And that's just a testament to the amount of hash rate that's out there from sovereign individuals. And we hope this trend continues.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about decentralization of Bitcoin mining and some of the topics that came up with one of my previous guests when it comes to the bottlenecks and how mining tends to get concentrated now with very few entities. But first, let's hear a little bit more about this. Do you know anything about this miner? And what did you say about actually adding the block? Can you clarify?
Yeah, so to explain the whole story, we kind of have to go into kind of the beginning of Bitcoin and how things started, just so people understand, the precedent nature of what this means. So obviously, back in 2009, when Bitcoin first launched, it was a single piece of software that ran on individual's computer, right? So that software ran the entire Bitcoin ecosystem. That included the full node software, the miner that mined on CPUs back then, and the wallet. So all three big parts of the Bitcoin ecosystem were integrated into that single piece of software. So when Bitcoin first launched, it was essentially the most decentralized state that it could possibly be in. That's because a single person using their own compute power, their own node, and their own personal PC was submitting those blocks and finding those blocks. So what happened, especially during the time period of around 2013, 2015, when ASICs were introduced. These are specialized processors that do the compute processing for Bitcoin. Those three aspects of Bitcoin essentially got split off. So the mining aspect got centralized into specific machines. Pools became prolific, where most of the block submission was done through pools in order for these miners to be able to recoup their costs quickly over time, instead of waiting for a single solo block, which could never happen if your mining operation wasn't big enough. So what happened is these centralized forces essentially took over Bitcoin mining. Bitcoin mining turned into this race to the bottom of finding the most profits, in order to maximize ROI in terms of fiat terms. So we've the whole point of the genesis of our company was to combat that, to have another reality of Bitcoin mining, where that original decentralized aspect still exists and is still possible for self-sovereign individuals to find blocks. And the important part of this is to make sure that censorship resistance is always there and is always a part of Bitcoin. The problem with centralization of Bitcoin mining, especially on the pool side and block submission side, is when you have corporate interests submitting the large majority of blocks. That's where transaction selection processing can occur. There's companies building essentially services that pick what transaction is included in the blockchain and what is not. And that sets a dangerous precedent that we're trying to fight. And that's kind of the genesis of the Apollo 2 and what we have been building for the past 10 years. And that kind of came to a fruition, in the past month. Um, and, there have been solo miners in the past, since 2015 when ASICs took over. But a lot of these solo blocks have been submitted to what are called solo pools, which are essentially other centralized custodians that run these solo pools that individuals submit that block, which in itself is cool because there's a lot of solo blocks that have been found this way. But what makes what we've done at Futurebit different is the device itself runs a full node on the actual product that sits on your desk. So when a person with a small miner that's attached to it finds a block, that block is then submitted directly to that personal node, and that personal node submits that block to the network. So there is no intermediary. It's that single person finding that block, putting that block template together, putting all those transactions together.
Mm-hmm.
There is no centralized transaction selection forces in there, right? It's running Bitcoin core, and the basic economics of what Bitcoin's about is submit the transactions that have the most value and the most fees, and that's it. There's no other force around that, and that's the beauty of what we've done. And we did the first block, and we hope we get to the point where it's going to be a block every month, and then a block every week, and then a block every day, and we're on that path, and that's going to be a bright future for Bitcoin, and we're excited for it.
Coin Stories is proudly brought to you by Bitdeer, a global leader in disruptive technology for Bitcoin mining and AI. As a publicly traded leader, Bitdeer boasts a massive 2.5 gigawatts of electrical capacity and infrastructure under development across 3 continents, positioning Bitdeer as one of the most diversified and power-dense computing companies in the world. Bitdeer's leadership pioneered the original advancements in Bitcoin mining ASICs and is now poised to disrupt the market again with groundbreaking new designs for the next generation of mining ASICs that are targeted to reach efficiencies of as low as 5 joules per terahash by late next year. Now they're leveraging years of expertise in data center and cloud management into high-performance computing through a partnership with NVIDIA. Join Bitdeer in reshaping the world of Bitcoin mining. Learn more at bitdeer.com and explore how they are pioneering the future today. I mean, it feels really empowering just hearing about it. The idea that anyone around the world, it's almost like finding a needle in a haystack. I mean, it's a lottery ticket, and it's so incredible. Let's dig into why decentralization is such an important cause in your mind. Let's dig into a little bit more about the risks that Bitcoin faces when it comes to censorship resistance potentially being obfuscated by some of these large companies. What are you really worried about?
Yeah, I think the main battle in the next, let's say, decade, I think, is going to be against those that value wealth and NGU number go up over those that value freedom, and that's the core problem that I see with corporate interests, government interests, and Wall Street infiltrating Bitcoin. It's inevitable, right? We knew it was going to happen. But what I'm concerned is I didn't see it happening at the scale that it's happening and how quickly it's happening, and how fast self-sovereign individuals are being left behind, in my mind. So if we get to the point where 90, 95, 99% of the blocks are submitted by corporate miners, or these centralized pools, then what does that mean for censorship resistance? Who's going to stop governments colluding with Wall Street and corporations, which they have done for all of eternity, and saying, sorry, this Russian transaction, you can't include it in your next block. And if you include it, we're going to sanction you, and your mine is out in Texas. We know where it is. We're going to shut off your power if you don't do it. And you can argue that miners act in their self-interest all day long, but when you have such large centralization forces in Bitcoin, it's hard to fight that. It's hard to fight, big government and big corporations against that, because they're going to operate in survival mode, right? They're not going to shut off their mind just because one transaction from Russia is in their mempool, and then that goes past Russia, right? So what if 10 years from now the government decides that all transactions need to be KYC'd? Every single transaction that hits the mempool needs to have a social security or personally identified tag to it. And then again, we're in the same spot where if 90%, 99% of transactions are processed through centralized forces, then they can easily implement that, whether we want to or not, on Bitcoin. Yeah, code is law, and Bitcoin is run in a decentralized fashion, but that only happens when there's enough decentralization on the network, where there's enough blocks being submitted by self-sovereign individuals where they can't censor that. And that's kind of like my goal in the mission of Futurebit, and the mission of others in this decentralized space that's gaining momentum right now, is to have enough hash power out there where 10% of blocks, 20% of blocks, 30% of blocks are submitted in this self-sovereign way, where it's impossible for any government entity to come in and say, sorry, these transactions can't be included in the next block. So that's the battle that I see playing out in the next 10 years, and kind of what we're fighting against. And we have to get back to what the core mission of Bitcoin was about and why it was founded, right? We have to people. It's great that Bitcoin's going up. It's great that we're not going to fight. We can't stop anybody from joining the network. Obviously, we can't stop Wall Street or governments deciding to make Bitcoin the standard in their monetary systems. But at the same time, I'm skeptical, right? It's like, as much as I want to believe what everybody that is joining the Bitcoin standard is saying on the corporate side, they've always been an entity that has brought in greed and destruction in the space. And we've seen it over and over again. It was FTX, Celsius, all those, the last cycle. And who knows what it's going to be this cycle, but we have to fight against greed somehow. And I think this is the best avenue to fight, is to inform people, to make people understand that they do have the power to make a big difference in Bitcoin. A 10 terahash device on your desktop might never find a block. And for most people, that's their reality. But someone did find the block. And what the point is, power in numbers, right? Mm-hmm. So if we have 1 million 10 terahash devices on the network, then a block is going to be found every day. That means 4,000 transactions every day are guaranteed to be included in the next block, and they will be censorship resistant, and there won't be anybody blocking your transaction. Sure, it might take a little longer to wait for that block to be found, but that's the reality that we need to get to, and that's my mission. That's what I care about. At the end of the day, I'm fighting for my family, my children, your children. Hopefully, I know you got married recently. Hopefully, you'll have a few as well. And we have to get to the point where we're fighting for the future of the next generation, the generation that will grow up on hopefully the Bitcoin standard. And that means that standard is something new, something that's not Wall Street, that has not been what has been for the past 50 years since we got off the gold standard, right? And we've seen what that has done to devaluation, to inequalities in wealth. And that's kind of what Bitcoin was created and was born against. And we have to make sure that the next generation has this tool with those principles and those principles intact. And that's kind of what I'm fighting for, and what I'm about, and what a large portion of the Bitcoin community that's kind of marginalized right now, because, obviously everybody, is happy that Bitcoin's up, and corporations are buying Bitcoin, and that's making everybody, more wealthy. But again, like I said originally when I started this, it's, do we care more about value and wealth, or do we care more about freedom? And that's, I think, the key question in the next decade for Bitcoin.
Well, it's a really powerful message, John. Definitely will resonate with so many people that are watching this because I think that for the average person, whether they're new to Bitcoin or maybe they've been in the space even for a little bit, they assume that mining it's out of the realm of possibility. You hear about energy costs; these machines cost so much. So, can you break down how you've actually been able to make it accessible? Because I think what you said is really important. That we might not think we matter as just one person, but when you add up a lot of us together and you put a miner in every home, that actually is very, very significant. So how are you able to make these accessible to the everyday person?
Yeah, so our main, so when we design the product, our main design restriction on the product was first of all sound and heat output and power cost. So we wanted to make sure that if someone bought this device, they wouldn't put it, start running it, realize that they have 100, 200, $300 power bill at the end of the month, and then shut it down. So we chose a power range it's in the 200 watt range where it makes sense for most people to never shut it off, regardless of the fiat economics of Bitcoin. Right. The goal is to make sure people mine Bitcoin, collect a little bit of Bitcoin or solo mine, and not have to worry about the power bill at the end of the day. So our device costs, less than $10, $15 a month, depending on your power bill in the US. And that's kind of how we've made the economics make sense on our end. So most of our customers won't care about the power bill. They're not going to sit there and worry about the ROI or whether they're breaking even. Most people are, but at the end of the day, it's about the Bitcoin that you collect and how much Bitcoin you have, and making sure that Bitcoin is distributed to as many people as possible. And that's how we've kind of done it with our product. We've made it small and powerful enough where it makes sense to run on your desk 24/7 and never turn it off.
This episode is brought to you by Casa. As some of you know, I recently updated my self custody, and Casa makes self custody so easy, even if you've never held your own keys or used multisig before. Casa has a state of the art app and live experts standing by to guide you every step of the way. For those with large Bitcoin holdings, Casa just rolled out a new service. It now offers a holistic security advisory service. As a private client, you'll get a 7-step security overhaul, personalized consulting, and your own private emergency line for expert help when you need it most. Get 10% off your Casa plan at casa.io/Natalie. Next up, Speed, the fastest growing Lightning wallet in the world. Send and receive Bitcoin, swap with stable coins, and even snag gift cards to earn rewards, all in seconds. Download Speed via the QR code or the link in my show notes and use code CoinStories10 for 5,000 free sats. And finally, are you ready to take control of your wealth? The Bitcoin Way is here to empower you. Learn how to take full self-custody and eliminate all counterparty risk. Set up a node and become the master of your own transactions and enjoy true autonomy. And upgrade your cybersecurity and protect your online privacy like I did. The Bitcoin Way specializes in personalized one-on-one training to help you become fully self-sovereign. Schedule a free consultation today. All right, back to the show. Can you talk about the importance of decentralizing where the miners point to? Because if everyone is in one of 3 pools, then that defeats the whole purpose, doesn't it?
Yeah, so that's another aspect that we've seen. There's been a lot of research in the space on pool centralization and pool collaborations amongst other, many pools that seem like they're independent entities, but they're not. There's a Bitcoin dev that has done awesome work, and I've collaborated with him on it. And we found that essentially, most pool, there's about 6 or 7 major pools. All the Chinese pools are essentially proxies of each other. Bitmain and Ampool and their proxies are essentially one large pool that makes up over 50% of the hash rate. And then you have Foundry, which is the major US pool that, services, it's a KYC pool that services all the major big corporate miners. They have, over 30% of the hash rate. So that right there is over 3/4 of the hash rate centralized into these 2 entities essentially that are doing block selection. So that's the issue with pool centralization. And what we're trying to make people aware of, and what we've made people aware of with a single person finding a block with a small desktop miner in their home, is that Bitcoin network was created and the the parameters tweaked in a way where you don't need a powerful internet connection. You don't need a powerful server to run a Bitcoin node. Um, and people have forgotten that, and a lot of these corporate miners have pushed that narrative out there. Obviously, it's in their best interest to keep as many other miners off the network as possible. Um, but I want to make it super clear to you and your audience that anybody can mine a Bitcoin block. Does it even if you're on a dial-up, technically you could mine a Bitcoin block. Sure, that your block might have a higher chance of being orphaned, but that 10-minute block time means that even if your block submission is delayed by 10 seconds, past, the major pools, like their major the reason that everybody goes to pools is that your block will be submitted, and those blocks will be on the network super fast within a couple seconds, because they're all peering with each other, and the most of those blocks will never get orphaned, which means that if someone finds another block within that same time frame, that your block will be essentially pushed out of the network. Um, and that's kind of like the narrative that's been pushed out there for most people to not solo mine, especially not just corporate miners, but even the big private mines. And this is, where I want to push back even more, is because every single private mine that essentially has more than one exahash of hash power should be solo mining technically. There's no reason for them not to. There won't be any losses in the long run, and you don't have to have crazy infrastructure to do it, and we've proved that on the blockchain, that a small ARM processor that's essentially a Raspberry, supercharged Raspberry Pi, found this block and submitted it to the network, and it was probably done in someone's house that had some lower end network connection. So the Bitcoin network is robust, and it's made robust for decentralization on purpose. It's created so individuals always have the chance to compete against corporate high end interests, and people need to really understand that. There's nothing stopping anybody from solo mining, from starting their own pool, from even private mines getting together, starting their own pools. You can literally point your whole exahash of, or your whole exahash of hash power to a single Apollo device and find blocks. And we've actually done this. So we've partnered with a pool where they have thousands of machines, and they've connected all those machines to the Apollo, and it's been able to handle all those machines. That's how much low processing Bitcoin mining in terms of block submission is involved. It does not take many resources. It's super easy to do, and here at Futurebit we've made it super easy for anybody to spin up a solo pool and make this super easy. So um, we need a lot more solo miners out there. We need a lot more solo pools out there. We should get to the point where even these big private mines are just solo mining and getting off Foundry, getting off AimPool, getting off all these major pools, and we're seeing a lot of these independent blocks being submitted on the blockchain, and this will make the value of Bitcoin go up even more in the long term. People will see that okay, right now we're seeing this big change of government, U.S. government power and corporate power in Bitcoin, but other countries are seeing this and are like, why am I going to join this network when most of this power is centralized in the U.S. now? But if people understand that any country, any individual, any sovereign nation, any sovereign individual can participate in the Bitcoin network at the base layer, that narrative will change, and people will be more empowered to join the network in this way. So.
Yeah, if anyone wants to learn more about the decentralization of Bitcoin mining and pools, I also talked to Bitcoin Mechanic. We dug into some of these topics as well, because Ocean is really, it's on a mission to do this as well, and distribute the hash power as much as possible. I want to dig in a little bit to to the challenges of building these devices? Because my understanding is they don't have a long lifespan because technology advances so quickly, and I'm assuming that the chips are only going to get more efficient and faster. And so, how difficult is that? I mean, putting out a device, I feel like I even experienced this with my Apple like iPhone, right? It's like every year I feel like I have to get a new one. Is this something where people have to essentially replace it constantly because it's so the technology's advancing so fast that you can't really keep up with it?
No, that's the cool thing of where Bitcoin mining is now, and where the chips, the ASICs that run the network are. They're at the point where they've caught up to this to the fabrication of where the iPhone is. So an iPhone has a 3 nanometer CPU in there. Most modern Bitcoin ASICs have a 3 nanometer ASIC in there as well. So we've caught up to the technology of the latest leading tech in terms of silicon manufacturing. So in the past, there's been a massive uptick in hash power and device output because we've been catching up to the latest node in silicon manufacturing. Now we've caught up to that. So going forward, the changes will be much less pronounced. You're going to see 5%, 10% changes every year. It's not going to be these crazy 20, 30, 50% changes where you have to swap out your equipment out fast to compete. And those economics change even more for smaller miners and smaller devices like ours, where the big miners are essentially on the fiat standard because they're profiting off fiat dollars, right? They're trying to make a profit off of Bitcoin mining in terms of fiat. That's how they operate. They're publicly traded companies, and that's their fiduciary duty. Individual miners don't care about that. All our customers that buy our product care about Bitcoin, the network, Bitcoin freedom, Bitcoin censorship resistance. So if their device, they're going to run the device way longer. So the original Apollo BTC we launched in 2020. It's almost our entire customer base is still running them. No one's shut them off. It's incredible to see. And obviously they upgrade as we introduce new devices, but most people are not shutting them off. They're just continuing to run them, and they're low power enough where that's the case, and that will be even more pronounced going forward. People aren't there won't be as much of a big need to replace hardware. It'll take 3, 4, 5 generations like it takes with your iPhone now to swap it out. When iPhones first came out, they were on the same kind of race. Everybody was swapping out their phone every single year because it was such a big upgrade every year.
Right.
Now it's gotten to the point where it's like you don't need to swap your phone out in 3, 4 years, and it's going to be the same with Bitcoin miners as well.
So no one came forward and said that they own the Apollo that won the block?
No, and that's the beauty of it, right? I was actually hoping no one would, because it kind of changes the magic. And I've pushed out marketing for our users and our devices. It's like if you find a block, you should put that thing in cold storage and never tell anybody. And that's kind of the point of it, right? We shouldn't know who mines these blocks, where this Bitcoin went, who did that transaction processing. That's the beauty of Bitcoin decentralization at its core. And that's the future we should see. And anybody that does find a solar block shouldn't come forward in my eyes.
Yeah, that was a very nice payday for them. I'm very jealous.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so I know that you guys have been very busy with holiday orders. Are you? I think we're gonna have a link on the screen, right, for people to order their device with potentially a discount. What do you want people to know?
Just like I've been describing for the past half hour, realize that your hash power, your individual sovereignty matters on the Bitcoin network. It's the core principle of Bitcoin. If you're a Bitcoin holder, if you bought Bitcoin off an exchange and Bitcoin as this stock type aspect that goes up and gives you value over time, great. But dive deeper into what the network is about, what that monetary network, decentralized network is about, and why that offers freedom to people. And that freedom is only enabled by others running Bitcoin on their desktop. And the only way for that to happen is for devices like ours to be proliferated to millions of people. And that's our mission, and that's what we're trying to accomplish. Yeah.
Well, awesome. If you want to order one, the link is going to be on the screen as well as in the show notes if you're listening to this on audio. John, thank you so much for joining me. It is really exciting to think about the network out there. We don't know where all these miners are. There are certainly lots of individuals who are participating in this on their own, and it's just exciting to think that they do matter. Every miner matters. So thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, future's exciting. Let's make it so.
Thank you so much for checking out this episode of Coin Stories. Make sure you're subscribed to the show and hit that notifications button so you never miss any new content. Also, check out our weekly free newsletter at thenewsblock.substack.com. This show is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Nothing should constitute as investment advice, and you should always do your own research. I'm always open to feedback and guest suggestions, so please feel free to reach out at info@talkingbitcoin.com. I'll see you next time.